Someone do this. Purchase the micro million. Oh, ah, got it. Oh, ah. എടാ പിന്നെ എക്സ്ചേഞ്ച് സ്വിച്ച് ഹിയർ അല്ല ജോയിൻ ഹിയർ ടു ആണ് കൊടുക്കേണ്ട കേട്ടോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്റെ ഇത് ക്യാൻസൽ ആവും. കൊടുക്കണം. വേണ്ട ലീവ് ചെയ്യണ്ട. ഒരാൾ സ്വിച്ച് ഹിയർ ടു കൊടുക്കരുത്, ജോയിൻ ഹിയർ എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ഓപ്ഷൻ ഉണ്ട്, അത് വേണം കൊടുക്കാൻ. ഓക്കെ മതി മതി. ഇതില് ഡോക്ടർ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് അടുത്ത ആരെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ അയാളെ കഴിച്ചു രണ്ടേരം വെച്ചാൽ സംബന്ധിച്ചു അവിടെ അത് തന്നെ അങ്ങനെ കാണും. ലൈവിലോ രണ്ടുപേരും ഇങ്ങനെ ഓരോന്നോരോന്ന് ചെയ്താൽ
Hi, Sanjay. Hi.
This product, not this. It's a
Hi. Hmm. Hi, Chandra. Hi.
only with the complete product. Don't have to worry about the fee. If deduction extension or bank transfer does not happen after the second, then we have
What
to,
that?
then we need that. Then the options that are staying makes sense.
Welcome, Professor Sandan. Welcome, Professor Sandan. Rammanohar and everyone. They're likely to get some more people.
Thank you, Rajan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now, Dr. Raja?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Very, okay, fine.
You are ready? We'll start in a minute now. I think people are
Yeah,
joining.
sure.
You can wait quickly for 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, no worry.
Okay.
साढ़े चार 4:30 में जाना साढ़े 4 और ये कार्तिक का बंदा है ये चेक लेके जाना है चेक मेरे पास है
So, IIMAD, please unmute others. IIMAD.
Good afternoon, Didar.
Hi.
Good to see you.
ये ठीक है मेरे पास जाएगा ये आप जाओ IIMAD, can you unmute Dr. Didar Singh? Otherwise, we'll be having some disturbance.
Yeah.
Please unmute everyone except Sanjay Bharat. Okay. I think we'll start now because so that we finish it on time. Thank you very much for everyone joining the book talk organized by the IIMAD. Basically, welcome to the IIMAD. Some of you are attending the IIMAD program first time. This is a 7-year-old institute. And this is a think we are developing to work on migration and development, the welfare of migrants, and of course for diasporas. We also have a lot of program on capacity building for young scholars so that they can excel well in their research in the coming decades. With these few words about IIMAD, you can know more about IIMAD. I think my staff will give you the link to the IIMAD. My research on migration goes to 1996 when K.C. Sakaria was a honorary professor at Center for Development Studies. In fact, both speakers also from Center for Development Studies, basically a CDS group. And in 96, Professor Sakaria came to me and told me, look, I started my first book on migration in Greater Bombay when he was 30s, based on the 1961 census. Now I am close to 70. Maybe I may live another 5 years. So I want my last study should be on migration. A migration survey I want to do. At that time I did the book alone, but now I can't do it alone. I need some help. Can you join me to help to do a migration survey in CDS. I agreed in 1996, 98 we got the funds, and he was there till 9th round. But the last round he was not there, otherwise he was there, and he was the founder president of the IIMAD. And in fact, I tell many people he practiced me to study migration. So he was practiced me to look at migration in different ways. And prior to that, CDS had several people worked on migration in a macro picture. T.N. Krishnan was talking about remittances, per capita income, and Gulati on remittances, P.R. Governor Nair, Thomas Isaac, some of them were doing some work on migration, but not the type of work we started on a big migration survey. So the CDS was more like there on migration and aging research in CDS. Now we have another person joined the CDS club or the migration studies club is Sanjay Baru. I never thought Sanjay Baru will join our team. That's why when I saw the book, when it was advertised, and I had a copy in my office, you can see the book. And I think that we have another person who really can, use his way of writing. The book which is called Secession of the Successful. People are moving out. Of course, there is at least 100,000 people renounced the Indian passport last year. It was announced in the parliament. So we know that people are leaving and people are also coming. So what policies government can think of bringing back? I think that's a big question we should discuss, because Mahatma Gandhi was a returned migrant. In any sense, we are talking Pravasi Padhati in his book. And both Sanjay Baru, who is going to speak about the book, I will not speak about the book, but he will speak about the book. We'll hear from the lion's mouth. The lion will talk about his book. So we'll hear from him directly, and followed by another known person, Rammanohar Reddy. Both of them are known to the public, known to the media, but still I'll introduce a very brief introduction. Sanjay Baru was editor of Financial Express, Business Standard. He was also part of the editor of the Times of India and the Indian Express. And the major thing we imagine is he was a media advisor to the former Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh. I think that's something brought him, and he did work with him. He has written book on him. There are many things after his stint as with the Prime Minister. So he's known to all of us. Many people knows him. I don't, everybody, when I said that Sanjay Baru going to talk to me in our book talk in IIMAD, he said, very good. And I think he's coming in and speaking in our platform in IIMAD. I think it will also create a lot of waves and how the migration is spreading. It's not just Donald Trump and Narendra Modi talking about migration and diaspora. I think we have somebody like Sanjay Baru talking about diaspora, I think, and the migrants. I think this is very, very important. We have the discussant, we a very brilliant person I will call, Rammanohar Reddy. He's also belonged to CDS. Both Rammanohar Reddy and Sanjay Baru belong to CDS. And Rammanohar Reddy was a founder editor of the Indian Forum. But he was journalism for almost 4 decades. In fact, I remember, I think probably Rammanohar Reddy also probably remember when there was a big campaign 25 years back or 20 years back, India signing campaign. And he was part of the edit page of the Hill. So I wrote an article saying that India is signing, not about the elderly people of India. So he sent me some comments, and finally it was published. India signing, but not a group of people called elderly. I think he remembers that. And he was also the editor of Economic and Political Weekly from 2004 to 2016. So we have 2 brilliant speakers. Both Sanjay Baru will talk about the books, and Rammanohar Reddy will talk about his observations, his comments, or he would like, and then we will open it up for a few minutes for the audience if you want to have any intervention. And then Sanjay Baru will respond to that, and we will end by that. Not taking any more time, I'm requesting Sanjay Baru to speak about his excellent book. I said it's must-read book, Secession of the Successful. Dr. Sanjay Baru.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Irudaya Rajan. I'm extremely grateful to you for inviting me to speak on my book. Let me hold up the cover of the book. This is Secession of the Successful, The Flight Out of New India. It's been published by Penguin. Um, I'm grateful to you particularly also because of your connection with Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum. In fact, one of the earliest studies of the impact of migration on the Kerala economy was done by my own classmate at CDS in the second MPhil course in CDS 1976-77, Raju Kurian. I don't know if Raju has been able to join us today, but Raju did, I think, one of the earliest studies of the impact of migration. And of course, over the last half century, this has become an extremely developed area of research. I'm not a scholar like you. There are many people, I have had as colleagues who have become, distinguished scholars. Chandrasekhar Bhatt from the University of Hyderabad, from JNU. There's professor of sociology was Binod Khadria, who did a lot of work on immigration, and of course in CDS over the years. But I can't claim to be a scholar. I've written different kinds of books in the last several years. My last book, which was also published by Penguin, was titled India's Power Elite, Caste, Class, and the Cultural Revolution, which is looking basically at the changing class composition and caste composition of the power elite in this country. The last chapter of that book looked very briefly at the fact that the Indian power elite, or people whom I classify as the power elite, I'm not going to go into that in today's presentation, had become increasingly immigrants. They were leaving the country, the children were leaving the country. The next generation of India's political leadership, business leadership, administrative leadership, defense leadership, the next generation was all leaving the country and going. And I drew attention to the phenomenon. But then several people suggested to me that I could actually develop this into a proper book. Once again, I went back to Penguin with this manuscript, which is looking in a little more detail. The three things that I try to address in my book, first, of course, is the what I call the changing class character of immigration. That, of large-scale immigration. I don't want to get into too much detail. I leave it to all of you to read it, but I classify large-scale immigration into three periods. The large-scale immigration of indentured labor in the 19th century and the early 20th century, which contributed to the creation of what we now call people of Indian origin around the world. The second phase of large-scale immigration, when large numbers of professionals, both working class as well as middle-class professionals, started migrating out of India. The working-class professionals going largely to the Gulf, while middle-class professionals were going largely to the West. And then I come to the most recent phenomenon of the immigration of the wealthy, the high net worth individuals, the urban rich, etc. And I make the point that, look, here is a changing class character of a large-scale immigration. That's kind of phenomenon that I try to draw attention to in my book. The second point I make is that, when professional immigration was happening in the 70s and 80s, particularly to the West of the doctors, engineers, etc., the professional economist was concerned. As many of you would know, Jagdish Bhagwati very famously worked on this the subject on brain drain, suggested a brain drain tax. And I look at some of that literature, most of it published in the Economic and Political Weekly, Jagdish Bhagwati, Dina Khatkate, etc., etc. A lot of people in the 70s, 80s focused on this phenomenon. But very mysteriously, it no longer captured the attention of professional economists after the turn of the century. And the turn of the century, in fact, saw a sharp escalation in the emigration of talented Indians, particularly IT professionals, software engineers, etc. And, and then the phenomenon gets normalized, what I call the normalization of emigration, uh, to the point that now uh, very few even regard this as a negative phenomenon. Um, in fact, it's become a quite commonplace to say, "Oh, people go, people come. There's people emigrating, people immigrating. The global. We are in a global economy. It's a global village." So we have normalized the phenomenon. Not only are we no longer worried about the phenomenon, we think it's quite normal, and much of the political rhetoric, if you see, and even academic, I mean, it's become quite commonplace to say that people just, okay, they go out, they come back. It's a normal phenomenon, and I question that. I question that for the simple reason that for a developing country like India, with large numbers of talented Indians who acquire those talents at home, to then be finding opportunities elsewhere is a loss of human capital. So there is the phenomenon of brain drain, but there's a larger phenomenon of the loss of human capital. And I think we need to understand what are the implications of this. I mean, I don't do that in my book. I'm not really very qualified to do that, but I certainly place it as a research subject that economists ought to be pursuing, that quantifying the loss of human capital. The second thing which I draw attention to is the increasing flight of capital, finance capital. The number of millionaires leaving the country and the investment going out. Last year, it was pointed out even by the Ministry of Finance that the foreign direct investment going out of India was greater than the foreign direct investment coming into India. That more Indians were investing outside India last year than the rest of the world was investing in India. And this is a new phenomenon. This is a phenomenon we see just in the last decade. Then there are several other related phenomena which I draw attention to. One, for example, is the growing number of people who are, whom we traditionally used to call non-resident Indians, becoming non-returning Indians. That is, the increasing number of Indians are no longer returning, and therefore, immigration is a one-way phenomenon or a one-way street. And I think that is something which, when I say it, it might sound normal, but the fact is that it is something which we have not internalized in our thinking processes. We continue to think of the phenomenon as a two-way phenomenon. And the other recent phenomenon I draw attention to is the number of Indians giving up citizenship. The foreign minister reported in Parliament last year that 18 lakh Indians had given up their citizenship in the last decade. And last year alone, I think another 2 lakh people had given up their citizenship. So these are all numbers which are from official data. Now this is a new phenomenon. I mean, the earlier Indians who went out took a long time to give up citizenship. Often they gave up citizenship for reasons of convenience. But now an increasing number are simply giving up citizenship because not only is it for reasons of convenience, but it's possible to do so by paying a certain amount of money. So several countries which are selling citizenship, which is again a new phenomenon. Now, finally, I draw attention to the consequences of all this in terms of what is happening, the backward and forward linkages, the economies that have emerged as a result of emigration and of the changing class character of emigration. And when for example, indentured labor emigrated in the late 19th, early 20th century, there was hardly any impact of that at home. The backward linkages of that was marginal. But with the emigration of wage labor, particularly to the Gulf, we saw a sharp increase in remittances. And people have drawn attention to the importance of remittances, though, as I again make the point, that today remittances are no longer as important. I mean, the justification often given for allowing emigration is remittances. But with $135 billion being the last year's amount for a $4 trillion economy, with $600 billion of reserves, I question the argument that remittances justify emigration. But what I find the increasingly interesting backward linkage are the various economies that have developed, in terms of elder care, in terms of food processing, etc., which are all new businesses that permanent emigration has created back home. And these are all interesting developments which have not been adequately recognized. Now, we come to a point today when this kind of large-scale immigration is being challenged. As you know, in the United States and in Europe, there's this anti-immigration politics has taken roots. So how this will move in the future, one doesn't know. It could continue, it may slow down. But I do think that this is now an important enough subject for policymakers to address, that both brain drain and wealth drain are matters of concern. And I hope my book will provoke some debate, some policy response, some attention to this rather than purely the celebration. In conclusion, let me add, I don't want to take too much time because I'd like to hear Ram's remarks and that question answers. One phenomenon that I do discuss in one chapter, or rather, let me say two phenomena that I do discuss. One is, in the context of Donald Trump and what is happening in the US, I draw attention to what I call Indians in MAGA, the role of Indians in making America great again. And in all the discussions about trade deficit and trade surplus, and Trump drawing attention to the fact that India's trade relationship with America is unfair to the United States, we have failed to draw attention to the role of the export of Indian human capital and the contribution of human capital, not just exported human capital, but also human capital at home, through the growth of what are called global capability centers, which are coming up in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and elsewhere, to the global competitiveness of American firms. In fact, I think this is a subject for a PhD thesis, which I hope some young scholar will pick up and try to estimate and work on. And the second and final phenomenon that I also draw attention to is the communalization of the diaspora. I mean, that is again something we've seen the last 10 years, that the overseas Indians have over a long period of time, been divided into religious groups, etc. That's not a new phenomenon, but the growing use of or mobilization of overseas Indians in communal through communal slogans and platforms. And I just draw attention to one example of Fiji, where traditionally the rivalry, political rivalry in Fiji was between ethnic Indians and ethnic Fijians. But today that has become a rivalry between Hindu Fijians and Christian Fijians. So the conversion of an ethnic conflict into a religious conflict, which, for example, we also see in Manipur in India. So, these are the kind of things I draw attention to with the hope that we try to understand the phenomenon of what we call overseas Indians. And I deliberately do not use the word diaspora for reasons we can talk about later. But this is a community of, almost 20 million or so PIOs and 35 million, NRIs. We have about 55 million people of Indian origin around the world. And that's a large number. And they play a significant role for the Indian economy. And we need to have a proper understanding of the politics and economics of overseas Indians. Let me stop there and We look forward to questions and answers.
Thank you, Sanjay, for your excellent or brilliant articulating that ideas which was emerging in the book. In fact, as I work on migration, one of the issue we are facing is what we call the not good statistics about the both the non-resident Indians, also people of Indian origin. So normally what I do is when you say NRI, you told non-returning Indians, I used to call them not required Indians. So it's like NRI, not required Indians. Before I open up to Professor Didar Singh, we have Rammanohar Reddy, and who will be the giving first intervention on the book, and then followed by this. Dr. Rammanohar Reddy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Rajan. Thank you, Sanjay. I have a brief comments. I'll be a bit brief. Please excuse me. Just from the beginning of this talk, I got some very distressing news about a personal friend. But my commitment to participating in this discussion, and I will do so. First, thank you, IIMAD, for this giving me read this book at detail. I want to start by saying that this book, is, in my mind at least, I may be wrong, is the first attempt. I mean, there are many studies of regions, groups, communities. I mean, like Rajan has been studying particular communities for, as he said, for almost 30 years. But after Chinmay Tumbe's India Moving, I think this is the first attempt to draw on many studies to present a history of Indian migration, including in the historical context. In the Sanjay, I think, has given. I mean, there is much more in the book than what he has been able to talk about. I think, but the main aspects, as I understand it, are also covered in his presentation, and I won't go through that. I would just start by saying that there are many stories and themes on my part. My own distillation would be of three main arguments. One, sorry, I'm a bit disoriented. I just read out what I. Yeah, the first is that the story of Indian migration abroad over the decades, and even here from the first indentured labor of the 1850s, is one of struggle and eventual achievement. They have been successful, if not in the first generation, then in the next one. These migrant communities retain and build on economic and social links with their home communities. And increasingly, this has taken the form of an assertion of the religious identity carried from home, which Sanjay mentioned towards the close of his presentation. The second story told here is that from the point of view of the policymaker and the home country, the concerns have shifted from what used to be called the brain drain to what the author now calls the wealth drain. This again he had mentioned, and this to me is my second point. The third, which he didn't mention and which I found very interesting, is less of an argument and more an observation, which I found very perceptive. It is that emigration abroad now, especially in recent decades, is not only of the educated, is seen as an avenue, not only economic, also social mobility. This ability to break free of the rigidities of Indian society. I think that's an important point to make, and which he discusses not very extensively, but he does discuss this in the book. In my view, much of the book is organized around these three themes. Now, there are other things he talked about, the different categories of migrants, etc. I won't repeat all that. I kind of go straight to my comments. Together, these migrants, the PIOs and the NRIs, that is the persons of Indian origin, as Sanjay mentioned, and the NRIs, add up to over 30 million spread across the world. They have now become one of the most visible migrant communities in the world. Academics, doctors, and engineers from India were always present in the West, alongside the service and construction workers in West Asia. But it was Y2K and then the service revolution that brought greater visibility to them. And with the emergence of both CEOs and first generation and entrepreneurs, they now occupy the headlines. I would mention 6 broad points. The first is something not in the book, but it struck me that earlier the people of Chinese origin in Southeast Asia and North America were the most visible migrant community in the world. They were also hugely influential in economic terms, remitting and investing money in China during the early years of the transformation in China. The visibility and influence of the Chinese seems to be now replaced by the Indians. Can we compare the two in various areas, degrees of assimilation, economic contribution to the host and home countries, and political influence in both home and host countries? I think it would be good to study and compare these two large waves of voluntary, semi-voluntary migrants, the Chinese and Indian. The second point is that in the monograph, the Indian migrant abroad is generally described and discussed in positive terms. If I remember right, there is one quote which Sanjay gives of a prince from Bahrain or Oman who spoke to him, that he describes them as liking these migrants, Indian migrants, because they are hardworking and conscientious. In that context, an interesting question is how assimilated and respected are they in the wider community? The skilled professionals in the US may be envied, but we also have stories of disparaging remarks on others from India, like for instance about the Patels motels. In East Africa and even in Southeast Asia, anecdotal evidence suggests a resentment towards Indians. Now, is that essentially because the Indians in these areas of a certain class are often small traders, doubling as money lenders and engaging in sharp practices? This side of the PIO is also something I think we should study. 3, Indians seek social mobility and when they migrate out. But how far do they break free of the rigidities of the society they have left? I refer here again to anecdotal evidence from the US, including a very few well-publicized cases in Cisco and Google of Indian migrants carrying caste and discriminatory attitudes to the US. Now, how strong are caste strikes among the community? It appears that while it is the upper middle class who constitute the preponderance of the skilled immigrants to North America, they often carry with them their caste attitudes and perhaps even solidify them in their host country. This again, I think, is something that needs greater acknowledgement and study. 4th, the book discusses in some detail the attempt by the VHP and BJP to build the global Hindu community, to keep alive the sense of Hinduness and not to forget Bharat Mata. This Sanjay mentioned. It even talks about how the Indian community has been used in the past to lobby US governments, as for example, on the nuclear deal. But a new and very important phenomenon is the influence that a powerful and radicalized section is seeking to have on political and social conditions back here in India and its direct involvement with Indian politics. We do know about the role played by the extremists during the 1980s from Canada in the Khalistan terror movement. But what we don't know about enough is the shadowy and yet deep links between the Hindutva community, mainly in the US, and the RSS BJP here. There is again anecdotal evidence that this community played an important role in backroom management of the 2014 elections and thereafter. Their interference takes, and I would call this interference, has taken the form of electoral support, electoral financing through the Hawala route, intellectual inputs into policy making in a number of areas. The impact this is having and is likely to have speaks of the power of the financial, political, and social power of a large section of the immigrant community, especially North America and West Europe. Again, this is something we do not acknowledge enough, leave alone study. 5th, a running thread through the book is that while the migrant may have remitted money home and the occasional entrepreneur may have invested in India, they do not wish to return. This, as the book points out, is very different from the first wave of returnees of scientists, academics, and even engineers who worked in the public sector. Now, it is true that in the first 2 decades of the Nehruvian project of building India, many young men and women who were educated abroad were fired by the zeal to participate in the nation-building project. But times changed, and later, not only did the political message of nation-building fade, but opportunities at home were few and far between for the skilled professionals. We will have our legitimate opinions about whether they should return or help in greater ways. But as scholars and commentators, we would be more interested in why they do what they do and why they don't do what they do. Fifth, to the Secession of the Successful, a powerful title and the subject of 2-3 chapters. The book details the dimension of new dimension of an old phenomenon of the wealthy and successful in India giving up citizenship, of their children starting at a very young age being trained and made to think of migrating abroad permanently. The numbers are large. As Sanjay said, there are almost 2 million for the period 2011-2023, over 12 years. But I just want to point out that this may not be just of the HNIs. They would also include many professionals in North America obtaining US citizenship after serving out their green card, etc. Still, it is a fact that we know that many HNIs are giving up the citizenship and moving base. Now, the book has I elaborate it here, is an interesting fourfold classification of the motives of those HNIs who are giving up citizenship. There are different kinds, from those who are, trying to escape the law to those who feel shut out of the power structures at present. Now, there's no question that the economic value of these HNIs giving up citizenship is substantial. And this says something about how they see the economic potential of India in the future. But I would think that a good proportion continue to stay financially invested in India and run their businesses from abroad. But of course, some do relocate completely. But I think we also need to discuss another phenomenon which perhaps involves a larger number of people, even if they are of limited wealth. In some respects, now more than ever before, increasing number of Indians who have not only their labor and basic education to get by, are seeking to flee. I deliberately use the word flee the country for economic, social, and even political reasons. The youth of Punjab migrate and, if they're lucky, find themselves working in the fields of Italy. Large numbers of Indians, single largest according to last year's data, are caught trying to cross from Mexico into the US. The lower middle class too are sometimes desperate to get away. For me, the tragic image that can never go away is of a couple with 2 children freezing to death on the US-Canadian border as they sought to enter the US. There is another worrying phenomenon which, to my mind, is not spoken about in the media, and this is the desperation of young, educated Muslims wanting to leave. This was always there for economic reasons, but now for social and political reasons as well, there is a desperation for the simple reason that they see a darker India ahead of them. Again, much of our understanding, we go by anecdotal evidence, but I've heard from the faculty of a number of public universities in North India about every year writing letter after letter of recommendation to their MA students who are Muslims as they seek to leave to study abroad, the hope of settling there permanently. Not many succeed, but there is an urge. All these groups, I think, would add up to a far larger number than the HNIs who have given up their citizenship. So I, for one, would look at the desperation of the marginalized along with the secession of the successful. Sixth, and finally, this again, Sanjay ended his presentation, is the age of the migration of the skilled professional from India on the cusp of an end. This is a question we have to ask. Will the wave of anti-migrant feelings sweeping US and West Europe, though not yet Canada, turn against the model migrant from India? The 1960s changes in US immigration rules facilitated one wave of migration. Y2K and the tech revolution led to another. The question is that ending? Will Indian students, even in STEM, no longer be able to remain in the US on work visas? Will there be a shift instead to the global capability centers, which again Sanjay has discussed in the book? So rather than migrate, they will be working here for US companies. Now, migration to West Asia may continue, and construction labor streams may take place to even Taiwan and Israel, again as discussed in the book. But will we be seeing in the decade ahead the end to the highly visible streams of skilled migrants from the 1990s onwards? That is something that we need to think about, both the policymakers and the commentators. I will end here by saying again that the book is very, very rich in detail, drawing on a number of reports, documents, and past studies, and gives us an idea of what I found most interesting is that an overview of the flow of migration right from the 1850s onwards, from the first indentured labor. I will stop here, and if the chairman will permit me, I will leave the meeting for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. I just hope that there'll be a good discussion. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rammanohar. I think you can please go ahead and we will manage the remaining part of the meeting. Thank you so much for your comments. I think you have given, your broad reading the full book and given your ideas. So I will come back to Sanjay for response once we receive some questions. Or you want to talk now, Sanjay?
No, I'll be happy to take questions. I think Didar has raised his hand, so let him ask his question.
Yeah, Didar, and also any other person we'll collect the question, then we'll go to Sanjay for response. Yes. We'll go first to Sanjay, first Didar Singh, then we will go to Silva. Sanjay, Didar Singh, please. Didar Singh, yes. Are you able to hear us?
No, he has to unmute.
Didar Singh, can you mute and speak? If you have some difficulty, please.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Didar. Yeah.
Good. So my question to Sanjay was about the persons of Indian origin who have become the heads of many companies in the US. Is that reducing now? And what is the reason for it? What is the reason for it? And how did only Indians become the heads of various American companies and not others? That's my question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Didar. We'll pick it up. I will look for the answer from Sanjay and Silva Rajivan. Silva.
Hello, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for the talk. My question is, sir, in your talk, you said that the remittance are no more important as far as our country is concerned. So, can you please explain it a bit detail?
Okay. Any other?
To this, and then we can come back. First of all, let me thank Ram. I'm sorry he had an emergency which he had to attend to and he had to leave. But I think he made a series of very important observations, and I'm grateful to him. The last point which he made actually is an extremely important one, which is that he said, I look at the secession of the successful, that one must also look at the desperation of the marginalized. I draw attention to the desperation of the marginalized when I talk about, for example, the number of Indians willing to work in Israel in the middle of a war. The Israeli government has been recruiting workers through the government of India for working in Israel in the last few months. I also draw attention to the donkey route, the number of 97,000 Indian illegal immigrants into the United States and their status, etc. The people dying at the border. So I do draw attention to what we can call as that segment of society, which is migrating not because they are successful, but because they are so desperate. And I think that is a phenomenon which is important. But since the overall focus of the book is really on elite migration, and I mentioned that at the very beginning, the point of departure for my book is the last chapter of my previous book, which was on the changing character of India's power elite. And Devesh Kapoor, who has worked on Indian Americans in the US, has spoken about the implications of elite immigration. For example, Devesh specifically mentions the number of children of senior armed forces leadership that are leaving India. And then I say, it's more than just armed forces leadership. Children of politicians, children of diplomats, children of government officials, children of businessmen. Sunil Mittal's two sons live out of England, and I give many other examples. So I'm drawing attention to what is essentially elite migration, but the desperation of the marginalized, which which also includes the minorities, particularly Muslim minority, which Ram mentioned. I think these are all important aspects of migration that require greater research, and I'm grateful to Ram for all his remarks. On Didar's question about Indian CEOs, I mean, you saw the news most recently. Another student from my school, Hyderabad Public School, has become a CEO of Procter and Gamble, Jejurikar, who happens to be the classmate of Satya Nadella. I do make the point, Didar, that we have been celebrating over the last couple of decades the success of Indians overseas, and I make the point that this is influencing a lot of Indians to want to go overseas. I mean, take my own school, Hyderabad Public School, when it had the 100 centenary celebrations last year or the year before. The kind of attention and focus it gave to all the alumni that are leaving India. When I was then asked to speak at one of those platforms, this is the point I made to them. And look, I belong to that section of the alumni that was obviously regarded as a failure because we didn't emigrate. Now, the school thinks that all those who leave India and go to America are successful, and all of us who chose to live in India are unsuccessful. This is a social phenomenon. And this is what is happening in many schools across the country. And I give some examples of schools where, the numbers emigrating right after a secondary certificate has sharply increased in the last 2 decades. So I do think that this phenomenon of Indians doing well is a double-edged sword. It could raise our profile internationally, but it also acts as a magnet for other bright young kids to want to go out. And that phenomenon, I don't think, will be challenged by whatever is happening in Western countries, because at the end of the day, these guys are serving Western interests. I mean, that is the point I make in my chapter called Indians in MAGA, Indians in Making America Great Again. And I begin with quotations from President Joe Biden. I think Biden said once that, Indian Americans are America's secret weapon. They are helping the United States. So as long as the elite is viewed as an asset, I don't think people mind. The attacks are mostly on H-1B visa holders, the lower spectrum, in the lower end of this social pyramid, people who walk on the road. I mean, if you're driving around in a Tesla or a Rolls Royce, why would anybody stop you and beat you up? But if you're on the streets of San Francisco, there is a lot of mugging going on, right? On the question about remittances, Ms. Silva, you see, when all these NRI deposits began to be accounted for, particularly in the early 90s, we attached great value to them. Because, if you remember, the 1991 balance of payments crisis was triggered by flight of, dollars out of NRI accounts. As India's foreign exchange reserve started going down towards the end of 1990 and in the early weeks of 1991, the first people who took money out of India were the NRIs. And I mentioned here my own interaction with NRIs in the early 90s, in December 90, in the US, the hostility with which they were looking at India. So NRI deposits played a particularly important role in the management of that period. And it is the Gulf Indians, the Indians in the Gulf, particularly Malayalis in the Gulf, who came to the country's rescue by bringing these remittances back home. And therefore, we saw remittances as an extremely important byproduct of immigration. And in fact, the Center for Development Studies did a lot of work on this. My friend, classmate Raju Kurian's work was on this. And subsequently, many people have looked at the impact of NRI remittances on Kerala economy. And that was in the 90s. Today, given the fact that your economy itself is a $4 trillion economy, and your foreign exchange reserves are as much as $600 billion, $130 billion of NRI remittances, I make the point that its relevance has gone down sharply. But those who justify immigration, even in government circles, those who justify immigration are justifying it on the basis of these remittances. I'm saying this is no longer a justification because the relevance of remittances has gone down and its necessity has gone for the Indian economy, right? So that's the point I'm making.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Sanjay. But I think the remittances point for India probably it is just close to 3%. But when you talk about certain states, for example, in Kerala, the last migration survey it is close to 23 to 25% of state income. So some states have,
Yeah.
But when you talk about India, I think probably it's irrelevant, 120 billion maybe. In some of the states, it's important, especially the migrants. They have to send back home if their families are around here. We have one more intervention I can see. RP Bhagat. Professor Bhagat, can you unmute and speak?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhagat.
Can you hear Professor Rajan?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
please.
you. Thank you. I think very excellent lecture and very interesting. And Sanjay Baru has well articulated the perspective of class and migration. So I just wanted to further know that is it something unique to India or is it something a global phenomenon? Because when I look at Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, many are migrating. Philippines is very at the top. Similarly, the other, Mexico, much controversy. That is the one point. Second point is that since 2000, I think 2003 and later on, all these, those who have abundant citizenship and got citizenship of other countries, they have got the OCI cards. So they cannot vote in India, but they can do anything, everything. So now you can have an American passport in your pocket and OCI card in another pocket, and you become the global citizen, very, very privileged. No visa, hardly you require visa in any going to any part of anywhere in the world. So what my question is that, can we see something that, and many countries are granting dual citizenship. There are more than 80 countries. So you can be Bangladeshi and you can be US citizen or a Pakistani citizen as well as a British citizen. But in India, things are different. One has to abandon the citizenship of India, but then the person has the OCI card. So what I'm just imagining, is it that nation state is reorganizing? And when in 21st century ending and then population growth ceasing to exist, is that we can think about that the nation states which has just, I think, 100 or 150 years of history, can we look at from that point of view? So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bhagat. Bhagat was professor at the International Population Sciences, my classmate at Mumbai several years back. And we will take one more question, Sanjay, then we will wind up with your response. Any other person would like to ask questions? Anyone of them?
Nisha.
One. Yes, Nisa Joseph. Yeah, Nisa Joseph will be the last intervention. Nisa, yes. Yes. Nisa, can you
Unmute.
Nisa unmute and speak?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sir, you mentioned about brain drain, wealth drain, and what about care drain?
What about?
Care drain. Care drain. Care.
Yeah.
Care drain.
CARE.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Care economy. Okay, care right. Okay. Okay, Nisa, I think Sanjay, that there is one more person raised their hand.
Yeah.
Jairam. Let us take this question also. Jairam? Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you for the talk, sir. So my question is, Indian when they go abroad, like the person of Indian origin who are settled there, they tend to vote for the parties which are generally left wing in nature, mainly due to their pro-immigration and pro-secularism related stance. But back in India, mostly they like to align with the ruling establishment, which is generally seen as nationalistic, more right-wing, culturally oriented. So why do you think that's happening? Is it because like most of these Indians who go abroad, settle abroad, are they thinking more like an Indian person, or are they more or less thinking like an American person?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. Final comments? Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for all those questions. First of all, the phenomenon is not restricted to India. We see many countries. In fact, India only recently is catching up with China, the largest, what you may call diaspora or overseas community for a long, long time, the Chinese, overseas Chinese. And we've seen overseas Japanese, overseas Koreans, overseas Filipinos, different countries. So India this phenomenon is not unique to India. I am only focused on India because I live in India, study India. Whether the granting of dual citizenship or OCI card, etc., is the end of the nation state? No, no, no. I don't think nation states are disappearing. Right now, we are seeing the world's most powerful country, the nation state, very much asserting itself in the United States. We are seeing, the revival of very traditional conflicts around the world. There's Russia, Ukraine, or India, Pakistan. The nation state is very, very active and very. So I don't see any decline of the nation state merely because the elites are able to get dual citizenship. In fact, let me also say, please look at my book. I have a fairly detailed discussion in the book on the debate in India on dual citizenship. And this was a subject that the Indian Constituent Assembly discussed in great detail. And there were different opinions. At the time of independence, there were some political leaders who wanted India to grant dual citizenship. But Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, and the entire leadership at that time took the view that no, Indians have to be given the choice. Either you become citizen of India or you become citizen of wherever you are, whether it's Mauritius or Fiji or South Africa or wherever, and you have to choose. And once you choose, your loyalty should be to the country of which you are a citizen. That was the view of the Indian government right at the beginning. Whether this care, care is only one dimension to skill, movement of skills, right? I mean, I assume you're talking of nurses or elderly people going outside the country. It's part of a phenomenon, social phenomenon of the emigration of skilled and unskilled workers. And caregivers are certainly skilled workers. And I think, particularly from Kerala, we see a large emigration of these skilled laborers. I make the larger point that I think, Dr. Irudaya Rajan also uses the term knowledge workers. My friend Chandrasekhar Bhatt, who's worked on this, also uses the term knowledge workers. I think Vinod Khatria from JNU has worked on emigration. The term knowledge workers has been used to refer to essentially IT, highly skilled workers. I make the point that even if you're an electrician working in the Gulf, your knowledge, you're using your knowledge to earn your income. A plumber is a knowledge worker. So in fact, a large number of skilled skilled workers going out of the country are part of the knowledge economy. And they've acquired these skills at home and are offering these skills in different other economies. Voting pattern, well, I don't study that in my book. I don't have any discussion of that, the politics. But, whether one is liberal or conservative in any given social context depends on one's own self-interest. So if you are a Hindu in the North India, you are a part of the majority community. If you are an upper caste Hindu in Chicago or Detroit, you are a minority. And how you think of yourself will vary. You know, how you think of yourself will certainly vary. And I think attitudes could change, political attitudes could change as a result. So, but these are issues I've not discussed.
We had a very good presentation, the book by Sanjay Bora. I think as he said, I think I also would like to recommend everyone should read this book, not because it's written by Sanjay Bora, but because it offers new ideas for much proper its research required, and he has given some ideas for that. He has idea for the next book now from the talk which he had and our points. So, and also I thank Rammanohar Reddy and all the other participants, including Dr. Didar Singh, Mr. Bhagat, and Jairam, and Nisa, and others who asked questions. And on behalf of the IIMAD, I take this opportunity to thank especially Sanjay. When I wrote to him, immediately I felt, I know that immediately that yes, I agreed. I think thank you very much, Sanjay, and hope to see you sometime in Delhi and have a coffee with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this discussion. And I'm grateful to you, to IIMAD, and for all those who logged in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and then